My mother stood at my apartment door and told me I had two choices: attend my brother's wedding or lose my college money. Then she looked past the graduation badge with my real name on it and told me not to embarrass the family because Danilo had actually become something. She didn't know I had already graduated at the top of my class. She didn't know my job paid more than hers and Danilo's combined. And she definitely didn't know that, at that wedding, she was about to tell her lie to the one man in the room who already knew the truth. That was her mistake. I used to think the cruelest thing a family could do was take something from you. But sometimes it's worse when they keep a version of you that no longer exists, then punish you for not fitting inside it anymore. Before we begin, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. Then stay with me, because this is the story of the day my family tried to make me small and change the way they said my name forever. The knock came just after 6, sharp enough to make me look up from my laptop. I was still in my work shirt, sleeves rolled to my elbows, with half a sandwich on a plate and a project report open on the screen. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet I had earned after years of living under other people's noise. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, my mother stood there holding Danilo's wedding invitation like it was a court notice. Behind her, my brother leaned against the hallway wall with one hand in his pocket. Danilo had that almost smile on his face. Not a real smile. The one he wore when our mother was about to say something cruel and call it common sense. "Cal," my mother said. Her eyes passed right over the small shelf near the door, right over the graduation badge sitting there in plain sight. Gannon Rusk. No one at work called me Cal. No professor had called me Cal. Only my family used that name, and usually when they wanted me to remember my place. "Mom," I said. "Danilo." Danilo lifted 2 fingers like we were buddies meeting at a gas station. He didn't step inside. My mother did. Not fully, just enough to place the invitation on my kitchen table. She set it down flat, turned it toward me, and tapped it once with her fingernail. "You need to be there," she said. "I know when the wedding is." Her mouth tightened. "That's not what I said." I waited. She looked around my apartment like she was inspecting damage. The suit hanging from my closet door, the laptop, the mug by the sink, the framed degree still leaning against the wall because I had not taken the time, or maybe the courage, to hang it. Then she said it. "Attend your brother's wedding or say goodbye to your college money." For a second, the room became strangely still. I was 31 years old, and somehow my mother still thought the word college could put a leash around my neck. To her, anything with tuition was still college. Graduate credits, certification fees, professional exams, it was all the same because learning what I had actually finished would have required asking. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because she had just threatened a bill I had already paid. Danilo made a small sound from the hallway, just enough to remind me he was enjoying this. My mother kept going. "And don't embarrass us there. Danilo actually became something." There it was. The money was the threat. That sentence was the blade. I looked past her at my older brother, the golden son, the groom, the man my mother had spent years polishing in public and protecting in private. He looked down at his shoes, smiling like he had nothing to do with it. "Danilo has a wife now," Mom said. "A career. People who respect him. This wedding matters. I need you to come, behave, and not make this about whatever phase you're in." Whatever phase. I thought about the degree, the one she had walked past. I thought about December, when I finished at the top of my class and sent one careful message to the family thread. My mother had answered with a thumbs up and then asked if anyone had checked Danilo's tux appointment. I thought about Northline Systems hiring me before my final grades were even posted. I thought about my compensation package, sitting in a folder on my laptop, already more than what my mother and Danilo made together. But I did not say any of that. That was the thing about growing up in a family like mine. You learned when people were asking for truth and when they were setting a trap. If I corrected her at the door, Danilo would call it showing off. Mom would call it disrespect. By breakfast tomorrow, I would be the bitter little brother trying to ruin a wedding. So I looked at the invitation, then back at her. I heard you. My mother mistook that for surrender. I saw relief move across her face, quick and satisfied. Good, she said. Then we don't have to make this unpleasant. Danilo pushed off the wall. See you there, Cal. He said my old name like a joke he knew I couldn't afford to challenge. They left the way they came, with my mother walking ahead and my brother following in her shadow like he had earned the light. I closed the door and stood there for a while. The apartment went quiet again, but it didn't feel peaceful anymore. The invitation sat on my table. The badge still sat on the shelf. Gannon Rusk. My mother had just threatened my future. She did not know I had already graduated. She did not know I had finished first in my class. She did not know the job she had never asked about had become a career. And the worst part was not that she didn't know. The worst part was that she felt confident enough to speak for my life anyway. What would you have said if your own mother stood at your door and told you not to embarrass the family? That was not the first time my future had been used to protect Danilo's mistakes. The invitation stayed on my kitchen table long after my mother and Danilo left. I did not pick it up right away. I stood there looking at it, hearing my mother's words over and over. College money, as if those two words still had the power to open and close doors in my life, as if they had ever been clean, protected, untouched. That was not the first time my future had been used to protect Danilo's mistakes. The first time I understood that lesson, I was 17, standing in my parents' garage with a college fund statement in my hand, and Danilo's newer car shining under the overhead light. It was late spring in Cary, the kind of evening when every house on the block looked calm from the street. Trimmed lawns, porch lights, basketball hoops over driveways. Our house looked like a normal middle-class home where parents cared about report cards and Sunday dinners and keeping promises. Inside, promises were a little more flexible. I had been waiting for scholarship letters. Every afternoon, I checked the mail before my mother got home. That day, between a grocery flyer and a dental bill, I found the college fund statement. I remember standing at the kitchen counter and opening it carefully. I had always been careful with papers back then. Applications, brochures, recommendation forms, financial aid checklists. I kept everything in folders because order made me feel like I had some control. Then I saw the withdrawal. $8,400. The memo line said, family expenses. That phrase bothered me before I even knew why. It sounded harmless, like groceries or a roof repair. But my stomach knew better than my head did. I carried the paper through the kitchen. I could hear voices in the garage, my mother's bright, practical tone, and Danilo laughing under his breath. The door to the garage was cracked open, and light spilled across the tile floor. When I pushed it wider, I saw the car. Not a luxury car, nothing that would make neighbors stop and stare, but it was newer than the old one Danilo had damaged after ignoring a warning light for weeks, then driving it until the repair bill made no sense. This one had clean paint, fresh plates, and that dealership shine people pretend not to admire. Danilo leaned against the hood like he had earned it. My mother stood beside him, arms folded, looking pleased with herself. My father, Colby, was near the workbench, moving a screwdriver from one hand to the other without using it. I held up the statement. What happened to the money? Nobody answered fast. That was my first clue. Danilo looked away and rubbed a spot on the hood with his sleeve. My father cleared his throat. My mother walked toward me like I had asked why the trash cans were still by the curb. You're smart, she said. You'll get scholarships. Danilo needs a car to get his life together. I stared at her. At 17, I did not have the words for what that sentence did to me. I only knew something had shifted. Smart did not sound like praise anymore. It sounded like permission. Because I was smart, they could take from me. Because I got good grades, I could recover. Because I did not wreck cars or miss deadlines or need rescuing every 3 months, My future could wait. I need college too, I said. My mother sighed, not sadly, irritated, like I had chosen the least convenient time to have needs. And you'll have college. You always land on your feet. Danilo finally spoke. It's not like you won't get into a good school anyway. He said it softly, almost reasonably, and that made it worse. He was not proud of taking the money. I could see that, but he was not ashamed enough to say no. I looked at my father. He gave me the kind of tired look men give when they want peace, but do not want to pay for it. Your mother is just trying to keep everyone moving forward, he said. Everyone? I asked. He glanced toward Danilo's car, then down at the concrete floor. We'll figure something out when the time comes. That was another sentence adults used when they had already decided the answer was no. I looked back at my mother. Will the money be put back? We'll see, she said. Right now, your brother needs stability. Stability. Danilo's stability had 4 wheels and new tires. Mine was a statement with a missing balance and a memo line vague enough to hide behind. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that I had worked for every grade, every recommendation, every small chance I had. I wanted to ask why his mistake had become my responsibility. But I still lived in that house. I still ate at that table. I still needed rides, signatures, tax forms, quiet enough to study. So I folded the statement once, then again. My hands were steady. That surprised me. My mother noticed and softened her voice in the way she did when she wanted the conversation to be over without admitting she had done anything wrong. Don't make your brother feel worse, she said. He's already embarrassed enough. That was the moment I understood. The money was gone, but I was still expected to protect Danilo from the discomfort of having taken it. I walked out of the garage without slamming the door. In my room, I opened the folder where I kept scholarship brochures and slid the folded statement inside. It did not belong there, but neither did the lesson, and I needed somewhere to put both. Were you ever the convenient one in your family? The one they called strong because they needed you to carry more? That night did not teach me that my family hated me. It taught me something more confusing. They loved me best when my needs did not cost them anything. By the time Danilo's wedding came around, my mother had spent years turning his ordinary progress into family legend, and my real accomplishments into background noise. The old college fund statement stayed in that folder for years. I carried the lesson with me longer than I carried the paper. By the time Danilo's wedding came around, my mother had become very good at turning his ordinary steps into family headlines. A promotion became a breakthrough. A new client became proof of leadership. A steady paycheck became evidence that he had always been the one with direction. My accomplishments were treated differently. Mine became background noise, the kind of thing people nod at while reaching for the salt. 3 weeks before the wedding, I sat at my parents' dinner table while my mother adjusted Danilo's tie and told everyone he had always been the ambitious one. The tie did not need adjusting. He was not even wearing it for the wedding. He had brought it over because Mom wanted to compare it against a fabric swatch for the groomsmen. Still, she stood behind his chair, smoothing the knot like he was a boy heading to his first school dance. Danilo has always had that drive, she said. Even when he was little, he knew where he was going. Danilo smiled into his glass of iced tea. Colby nodded from the other end of the table, quiet as usual. My father had a talent for agreeing without getting involved. It kept him comfortable and left the rest of us to live with whatever Mom decided was true. Danilo started talking about work. We're expanding a few regional accounts, he said. I've got clients asking for more platform support, more growth planning. My team is looking at a strong quarter. It sounded polished. It also sounded like something he had practiced in traffic. A cousin asked, "How many people are on your team now?" Danilo shifted smoothly. "It depends on the account structure, but honestly, right now I'm focused on the wedding. Tylee's family has put a lot into this." Mom rescued him before the silence could breathe. He's being modest, she said. He's always been that way. I looked down at my plate. My phone buzzed beside my napkin. I glanced at it and saw an email preview from Northline Systems. The subject line mentioned the security architecture project I had been assigned to lead the next month. Lead. Not assist. Not observe. Lead. I locked the screen before anyone asked. No one did. Mom passed the green beans toward me without looking directly at my face. Gannon's still figuring out his next step, she said, as if she were discussing a neighbor's son she had heard about through church. I set the bowl down carefully. Danilo noticed my phone. Work stuff, Cal? Or school stuff? He said it lightly, and that was the trick. A person can hide a lot of disrespect under a friendly tone. If I corrected him, I would look touchy. If I explained my job title, I would look like I was competing with the groom. So I said, just an email. Mom turned the conversation back to the venue. Tylee's father knows a lot of people, she said. Jared has connections all over healthcare. We need everything to look organized, respectable, no distractions. No one said my name, but the words still found me. That was how my mother worked. She could point without lifting a finger. Dinner ended around 8. I helped clear plates because old habits have roots. Danilo left his glass on the table and went into the living room to answer a call. Mom followed him halfway, asking if he needed anything. Colby rinsed a serving spoon and said, "Your mother just wants this wedding to go smoothly." I almost asked him what smoothly meant when one son had to keep disappearing to make room for the other. Instead, I dried my hands and drove back to Raleigh. The roads were calm, and the sky had gone dark by the time I reached my apartment. I changed out of my button-down, made coffee I did not need, and opened my laptop to answer the Northline email. Work was easier than family. At work, a problem had edges. You could name it, map it, solve it. Around 10:30, my phone lit up. It was Kresha, my cousin. "Hey, can you confirm rehearsal dinner time? Mom says this is the latest schedule." A screenshot came through before I could answer. At first, I looked at the time and location. Then I saw the group name at the top. Danilo Wedding Family. My number was not in it. I enlarged the image with 2 fingers. The screenshot showed weeks of messages, seating questions, tux updates, brunch plans, photo lists, who would ride with whom, who should sit near the front, who would help Mom keep everyone on schedule. Then one line stopped me. "What about Gannon?" Below it was my mother's reply. "He'll come if he wants. Don't plan around him." I stared at those words longer than I should have, not because they shocked me. Suspicion and proof are different things. Suspicion sits in your chest. Proof sits in your hand. Another text from Kresha appeared. "Wait, you're not in this chat?" I typed 3 different answers and deleted each one. "No, I guess not." That was all I sent. I did not call my mother. I did not ask Danilo why his wedding family chat did not include his only brother. I did not send a dramatic message to the group I had never been invited to. I just saved the screenshot. Not for revenge. Not yet. Because a family can tell you you're imagining things for only so long before their own words start doing the talking. The group chat said family. My name was nowhere inside it. That night, I understood the difference they had been living by all along. They wanted my attendance, not my presence. They wanted my obedience, not my voice. A week later, my mother called to make sure I understood exactly how small she expected me to be at the wedding. By then, the pattern had become hard to miss. First, I was left out of the planning. Then I was told my attendance mattered. That was how my family liked things. Invisible until useful. Optional until needed. Quiet until commanded. A week after that group chat screenshot, my phone rang on a Saturday morning. I was standing in front of my closet, looking at the suit I had bought with money my mother still thought I needed from her. It was charcoal, plain, well-fitted, not expensive enough to invite comments, not cheap enough to apologize for. I had paid for it with my own paycheck after a long Tuesday at Northline, and that small fact gave me a private kind of steadiness. I answered. Hi, Mom. She skipped hello. I need to go over a few things for the wedding. Of course she did. Okay? Arrive on time. Don't drink too much. Don't bring up anything personal. Don't make awkward jokes with Tylee's family. And please, Gannon, do not try to impress anyone. I looked at the suit sleeve between my fingers. What exactly do you think I'd say? There was a pause. Not guilt, calculation. Tylee's family is very respectable, she said. Jared knows important people. Danilo has enough on his plate. This is his day, and I don't want any unnecessary attention. Unnecessary attention. That was a polite way to call your own son a risk. I'm not planning to make a speech, I said. You know what I mean. I did. That was the problem. She was not worried I would act foolish. She was worried I might stop playing the role she had assigned me. The unfinished son, the one still trying, the one who needed family patience and maybe a little pity. Don't try to impress anyone, she repeated. Just come, be pleasant, and let Danilo have his moment. I looked at the degree still leaning against the wall, then at the suit I had bought myself. I heard you, I said. She liked that answer. She always had. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding, in a private dining room tucked behind a polished steakhouse near Cary. I drove there after work, giving myself extra time because I knew my mother would use even 5 late minutes as evidence. The room had white tablecloths, low flowers, folded napkins, and place cards arranged like somebody had cared about every detail. That made what happened next harder to dismiss. Marlene Voss, the venue coordinator, greeted guests with a clipboard and a practiced smile. You must be with the Rusk family. I am, I said. She scanned the chart. You can find your place card on the tables. Let me know if anything looks off. I thanked her and stepped inside. Danilo and Tylee were near the front table. My parents were there too. Jared Wren sat close by, laughing with a man I did not know yet. There was an empty chair near my father. My mother's purse sat in it like it had more right to be there than I did. I checked the front table once, then again. No card. I moved through the room slowly, past cousins and old neighbors, and people who greeted me with that cheerful vagueness families use when they are not sure where you fit anymore. At the last table, near the kitchen doors, I found it. A small white card leaned against a folded napkin. Cal. Not Gannon Rusk, not even Gannon. Cal. The kitchen door swung open behind me, and a server passed with a tray of rolls. Warm air brushed my back. For a second, I just stood there, looking at that one short word. The card did not simply put me at the wrong table. It put me back into a life I had already outgrown. Danilo noticed. He walked over with a drink in his hand, loose and smiling, the groom receiving his kingdom. Nothing personal, he said. We're saving the important seats. A couple of relatives nearby chuckled, softly enough to pretend it was harmless. Public humiliation works best when everyone agrees to call it a joke. I looked at him. Important seats, he lifted one shoulder. You know how these things are. My mother appeared before I could answer. She glanced at the card, then at my face. It's Danilo's night, she said. Don't start. That was the family rule in its purest form. Danilo could insult me in a room full of people. If I objected, I was the problem. My father looked from the front table to me. His mouth opened, then closed. Finally, he said quietly, "Just sit down, son." I almost asked him which son he meant. Marlon came by a moment later, noticing I had not moved. If there's been a seating mistake, I can check the chart. I looked toward my mother. Her purse still guarded the empty chair. Then I looked back at the card. No mistake, I said, because there was a difference between an accident and a message. I pulled out the chair. Its legs scraped the floor just loud enough for me to hate the sound. I sat near the kitchen, close enough to hear plates being stacked and orders being called behind the swinging door. The dinner went on around me. Toasts, laughter, stories about Danilo's childhood, his determination, his future. Every few minutes the room turned toward him like flowers toward sunlight. I kept my hands folded in my lap until no one was looking. Then I picked up the place card. Cal. I slid it into the inside pocket of my jacket. Not because I wanted it, because some part of me knew I might need proof later that I had not imagined how small they tried to make me. By the next afternoon, they stopped pretending the table was the only place I did not belong. The next afternoon, the venue smelled like roses, floor polish, and expensive perfume. Guests had not filled the ballroom yet, but the wedding machine was already moving. A florist crossed the hallway with a box of spare blooms. Someone from catering hurried past with a tray of water glasses. Marlon stood near the garden doors with a clipboard, guiding people from one photo setup to the next. I had my suit on, my tie straight, and the place card from the rehearsal dinner still tucked inside my jacket. Cal. I could feel the edge of it when I moved. The photographer lifted her camera and called out, "Immediate family, please." Out of habit, I stepped forward. I was Danello's brother, the youngest son. Whatever else my family had made complicated, that should have been simple. Then my mother raised one hand. Not high, not dramatic, just enough to stop me before I reached them. "Let's do core family first," she said. Core family. I looked at her, waiting for the rest of the sentence. There wasn't one. Danello adjusted his jacket and stood beside Tylee. Mom moved close to him, smiling like the day had finally arranged itself correctly. Colby took his place on the other side. He saw me. I know he did. His eyes touched mine for half a second, then dropped toward the grass. Marlon looked down at her checklist. Should Gannon be included in this one? My mother answered without looking at me. We'll get him later. The photographer, trying to keep things on schedule, gave a quick professional smile. All right, everyone, nice and close. The shutter clicked. Just like that, a version of the Rusk family was saved, without me in it. It was not loud. Nobody shoved me. Nobody called me unwanted. That would have almost been easier. This was clean, polite, permanent. A place card could be thrown away. A wedding photo went on mantles, holiday cards, anniversary posts. It became evidence of who mattered that day. They were not just seating me at the edge of the room. They were saving a memory where I had never stood there at all. I thought about leaving, not storming out, not making a speech in the parking lot, just walking to my car, driving back to Raleigh, and letting them have the wedding they had already practiced without me. Then Tylee looked at me. She did not say anything. She was in a white dress, surrounded by people pulling her in every direction. But her face changed. Her eyes moved from me to Danello, then to my mother. That look hurt more than I expected. Tylee had been around the Rusk family for one weekend and already saw something I had spent half my life explaining away. Have you ever been in the room with your own family and still felt like you were not part of it? Standing there outside the frame, I remembered 3 nights earlier at Northline. It was late and most of the floor had gone quiet. My office lights were still on. A security dashboard glowed on one monitor. On my desk sat the degree I had not hung yet, the offer documents I had never shown my family, and an email from Dr. Shanna Vale with the subject line, "Proud of you." My mother's voicemail played through my phone speaker. "If you don't come to that wedding and behave, don't expect us to keep paying for this college fantasy." College fantasy. I had stared at the degree then, almost embarrassed by how sad I felt. Not proud, not angry, sad. Because part of me had still been waiting for my mother to ask. Dr. Shanna's email was still open beneath the voicemail notification. "You earned every inch of this. Don't make yourself smaller for people who only know how to measure you against someone else." I read that line 3 times that night. Back at the venue, another camera clicked. Someone laughed near the garden. My mother moved on as if nothing had happened. The old instinct told me to leave. Another old instinct told me to stay and swallow it. But there was a third option forming now. I could stay without disappearing. I could refuse to give them the scene they wanted, and still stopped protecting the story they kept telling. My fingers brushed the place card inside my jacket. That little white card from the wrong table. The wrong name. The wrong life. I did not throw it away. I walked back toward the venue, not because I forgave them, because I was done helping them erase me. I stayed through the ceremony. I stood where they placed me, smiled when people looked my way, and watched Danilo marry Tylee under flowers my mother had probably inspected 3 times before breakfast. Afterward, while guests drifted toward cocktail hour and the wedding party scattered for more photos, I checked the schedule on my phone. There was a break before the evening reception. Not long, but enough. Enough to breathe somewhere my mother's voice was not filling the room. I drove back to my apartment with the radio off. Raleigh traffic was light, and the silence inside my car felt cleaner than the silence I had carried at the venue. When I got home, I did not sit down right away. I went straight to the degree leaning against my wall. For 6 months, I had told myself I had not hung it because I was busy. Work was demanding. Weekends got away from me. I needed the right frame. The truth was less convenient. Some part of me had still been waiting for my family to care enough to ask where it was. I found a nail in the kitchen drawer, took a small hammer from under the sink, and put the degree on the wall. It leaned crooked at first. I adjusted it once, then stopped. It did not have to be perfect to be true. The paper on that wall answered my mother better than any speech could have. College fantasy. That was what she had called it on my voicemail. Yet there it was, under glass, with my name printed exactly right. Gannon Rusk. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I did not prepare a scene. I did not gather evidence to throw in anyone's face. That was not the kind of man I wanted to become. I only checked what already existed. My LinkedIn profile was current, but I made sure it was public. Lead Systems Architect at Northline Systems. Education completed. Graduation date visible. No announcement, no dramatic post. No humble little paragraph pretending not to brag. Just facts. Then I opened my desk drawer and took out a few business cards. I slid them into my wallet beside my license. My jacket lay over the chair. I reached into the inside pocket and pulled out the place card from the rehearsal dinner. Cal. A small white card from the wrong table. I held it next to one of my business cards. One card carried the name my family used when they wanted me reduced. The other carried the name I used in rooms where my work had weight. I put both away. That was when the real decision settled in. If I went back and corrected my mother in public, I would become the brother who tried to steal Danilo's wedding. If I stayed quiet while she kept lying, I would become the son who helped her keep erasing me. So I chose something else. I would not chase anyone around that reception with my resume. I would not corner guests and explain my family. I would not punish Tylee for marrying into a mess she was only beginning to see. But if someone asked me a direct question, I would answer it. If my mother dragged her false version of me into the room, I would not carry it out for her. My plan was not revenge, it was visibility. Before I closed my laptop, I opened the wedding website to double-check the reception timing. A final guest list had been attached with the seating updates. I scrolled without thinking much of it until one name made my hand stop. Joran Hayes. I knew that name. Not personally. We had never shaken hands. But his name had crossed my desk in project notes, approval summaries, and migration reports from a hospital network security rollout my team had helped complete. I had led the architecture side. Joran Hayes was connected to the systems board that had reviewed the final work. He might not know my face, but he would know my name. For the first time all day, the reception did not look only like a trap. It looked like a room where the truth might already have a witness. I reread Dr. Shanna Vale's email before I left. You earned every inch of this. Don't make yourself smaller for people who only know how to measure you against someone else. Her words did not make me fearless. They made me steady. I put my jacket back on. The suit was the same one my mother had warned me not to use to impress anyone. In the mirror, I did not look rich. I did not look like payback. I looked like myself. That was enough. When I left the apartment, the degree was on the wall behind me. The business cards were in my wallet. The place card was still in my pocket. And Joran Hayes' name stayed in my mind the whole drive back. I was not walking into that reception to punish anyone. I was walking in as the man they never bothered to meet. By the time I stepped back into the reception, the ballroom had changed from ceremony calm to cocktail hour shine. Warm lights reflected off the polished floor. Glasses clinked. Servers moved between small circles of guests with trays of appetizers. People were laughing in that careful wedding way, pleasant and polished, even when half of them had only met that afternoon. I paused near the entrance long enough to take the room in. The degree was on my apartment wall now. My business cards were in my wallet. The place card that said Cal was still tucked inside my jacket. And across the room, my mother was already performing. She stood beneath a gold light with a champagne glass in her hand, smiling at Jared Wren and a tall man in a navy suit. Danilo was beside her, shoulders relaxed, groom's smile ready. Tylee stood close enough to be part of the circle, but not close enough to miss anything. I knew the man in the navy suit before anyone introduced him. Joran Hayes. I had seen his name on reports, project summaries, and approval notes at Northline. I had never stood across from him in a ballroom, but professionally, his name was not strange to me. My mother noticed me before I could decide whether to pass by. Gannon, she called, bright and sweet. That tone was for other people. She had a whole voice she used when witnesses were present. I walked over. "Oh, and this is our youngest," she said, placing a hand lightly on my sleeve. "Gannon." For half a second, I thought she might stop there. She didn't. "He's still trying to finish school," she continued. "We told him today was not the time to worry about all that. Just enjoy himself and not embarrass Danilo. Danilo is the one who really became something." There are insults that sound ugly right away. Then there are insults dressed for church, polished until people mistake them for concern. This was the second kind. Danilo gave a soft laugh. "Mom worries about him. You know how youngest kids are." Jared Wren gave me a polite nod, but his expression shifted just enough for me to notice. He was a father. Maybe he had heard the edge under the sugar. Tylee did not laugh. Her eyes moved from my mother to me, then to Danilo. She had seen the seating. She had seen the photo. Now she was hearing the story that made both of those things possible. Joran looked at me more carefully. "Still in school?" he asked. There it was, a simple question, not rude, not loaded, just a door opened by someone who did not know he had walked into a family script. For 1 second, the old reflex rose up. Smile. Let it pass. Keep the peace. Do not make Danilo's wedding uncomfortable. Do not give Mom a reason to say you caused a scene. Then I remembered the name on my wall. I remembered Dr. Shauna's email. I remembered standing outside the family photo while the camera saved a version of the day without me. Silence right then would not have been kindness. It would have been cooperation. So I answered him. "I graduated in December," I said, "top of my class." The circle went still in a way only small groups can. No one gasped. No music stopped. The room did not turn around. But inside that little ring of people, something changed. My mother's champagne glass stayed halfway between her chest and her mouth. Danilo's smile tightened. Tylee looked straight at me. Joran tilted his head. "Gannon Rusk?" "Yes, sir." "From Northline Systems?" My mother blinked. I nodded. "That's right." Joran's face opened with recognition. Not surprise exactly. More like pieces finally lining up. "I've seen your name on the migration reports," he said. "You led the architecture side for our hospital security rollout." Danilo stopped moving his glass. Joran turned slightly toward Jared. "That was not a small project. His team saved us months of cleanup." Jared looked at me again, but differently this time. "That's impressive work," he said. I gave a small nod. "Thank you." I did not look at my mother first. That mattered to me. I did not want to make the truth into a weapon. I wanted to let it stand on its own, but I could feel her trying to find a way back to the old story. "Well," she said with a laugh that did not quite land, "Gannon never was one to talk much about these things." That was a clever little move. Make my silence the problem. Make her ignorance my fault. But it sounded weaker now. Because Joran knew something she didn't. Jared had heard it. Tylee had seen enough to understand this was not a harmless misunderstanding. My mother had threatened money I no longer needed. What Joran knew, and what she had never asked, was that the position she dismissed as still figuring things out paid more than her job and Danello's combined. The money was never the point. The point was that she had stood in front of strangers and spoken confidently about a son she had stopped learning. Joran looked back at me. "Are you staying with Northline after the rollout?" "Yes," I said. "I'm leading another security architecture project next quarter." "Good," he said. "People who can translate technical risk into operational planning are hard to find." That sentence did more than praise me. It placed me in a world where my work had value, where my name meant something, where I was not just the younger brother at the last table. Tylee's face softened, but not in pity, more like recognition. She looked at Danello then, and for the first time all weekend, he seemed unsure what expression to use. My mother took a careful sip of champagne. The truth did not shout. It just stood there long enough for everyone to see it. And for that moment, I was not outside the frame. Then Danello gave one short laugh, too sharp to sound natural, and tried to turn the truth into another thing I had done wrong. "Well," Danello said, lifting his glass like he could still toast his way out of it, "that's news to us." He smiled at the circle, waiting for someone to join him. No one did, so he pushed harder. "Guess my little brother forgot to tell his own family he became a big deal." There it was, the turn. He could not deny my degree. He could not deny Northline. He could not deny that Joran Hayes had recognized my work in front of Jared Wren and Tylee. So he changed the story. Now I had not been ignored. Now I had hidden things. Now I had chosen his wedding, his day, his room, to make everyone uncomfortable. Danello took a sip and added, "Funny timing, though. You had to bring it up today?" My mother's face relaxed by half an inch. She saw the opening. If Danello could make me look jealous, then she did not have to explain why she had just told a false version of my life to people she wanted to impress. Tylee looked at him, not me. That mattered. Jared Wren's polite expression became still. Johan stayed quiet. He did not step into the family part of it, and I respected him for that. I felt the old training rise up in me. Explain everything, soften it, make sure no one thinks you meant harm. Protect the room, protect the wedding, protect Danello from feeling exposed. But if I explained too much, I would sound defensive. If I listed every dinner where nobody asked about my work, I would become the man dragging old wounds into a ballroom. If I said nothing, Danello would get to name the moment. So I looked at my brother. Not at my mother, not at the guests, him. "You never asked." The sentence was small. It did not need to be bigger. Danello's glass stopped near his mouth. My mother opened her lips, then closed them again. Tylee's eyes shifted from me to Danello. There was no anger in her face yet, just a question she could not unhear. Jared looked down for a moment, the way decent people do when they realize they have walked into something older than the conversation in front of them. "Have you ever been blamed for hiding something by people who never cared enough to ask?" Joran cleared his throat gently, not to rescue me, but to return the room to solid ground. "Gannon," he said, reaching into his jacket, "call me Monday." He handed me a business card, then took a pen from his pocket and wrote a direct number on the back. "I want to introduce you to our systems board. We're reviewing infrastructure security again next quarter. I accepted the card with both hands because my father raised me with some manners, even if he forgot to use his when it counted. Thank you, I said. I'd appreciate that. Inside my jacket, I could feel the other card. Cal. For a second, both cards were in the same pocket. One had been used to place me near the kitchen doors. The other opened a room my family had never cared to imagine me in. One card told me where they thought I belonged. The other showed me where my work had already taken me. I did not smile at Danilo. I did not look at my mother to see if she understood. That would have made it a performance, and I had spent too much of my life being pulled into theirs. The reception moved on because weddings do. Music started, guests found tables, people laughed louder than they needed to. But the air around our family had changed. For the rest of the evening, people spoke to me with accurate information. Joran introduced me to two men from the hospital side. Jared asked a careful question about how systems teams handled patient data during a transition. Tylee was gracious to everyone, but quieter with Danilo. I stayed through dinner. I clapped during the toasts. I did not punish the bride for marrying into a family she was beginning to see clearly. A week later, my phone rang while I was making coffee in my apartment. Mom. The degree was on the wall now. Joran's card sat on my desk beside my laptop. The graduation badge still rested on the shelf near the door. I answered because I wanted to know which version of her would call. Gannon, she said, soft in that careful way. There were misunderstandings at the wedding. I leaned against the counter. Were there? You let people think we didn't support you. There it was. Not I'm sorry, not I didn't know, not I should have asked. You let people think. I answered a question, I said. She exhaled. We always knew you were smart. Maybe we pushed you hard, but clearly it worked. That was almost worse than the insult. If she could not deny what I had done, she would try to own it. She would take years of indifference and call it parenting. She would turn neglect into a strategy and ask me to be grateful for surviving it. I looked at the degree on the wall. It was no longer leaning behind a desk, waiting for somebody else to make it real. You didn't push me, I said. You ignored me. There's a difference. That's a cruel thing to say to your mother. No, I said. It's accurate. The line went quiet. Then I said what I should have said years earlier. You didn't misunderstand me, Mom. You stopped checking who I became. She did not have an answer for that. Not one that would have been honest. I did not hang up in anger. I did not block her number. I did not offer forgiveness just to make the silence easier. I ended the call and set the phone face down on the counter. For once, the degree on the wall did not feel like evidence I was waiting to show someone else. It felt like truth. 3 months later, I walked into a room where nobody needed my mother to explain who I was. The months after the wedding did not feel dramatic from the outside. I still went to work. I still bought groceries. I still answered emails, paid bills, and made coffee before sunrise when the project schedule got heavy. Life did not suddenly become perfect because one room learned the truth. But something inside me had changed direction. I no longer checked my phone with the same old fear. I no longer rehearsed explanations for people who had never asked the question. I no longer carried my mother's version of me like a coat I had outgrown, but felt guilty throwing away. 3 months later, I walked into a conference room where nobody needed my mother to explain who I was. It was early enough that the room was still mostly empty. Morning light came through the windows, pale and clean. There were coffee cups near the sideboard, laptops waiting on the table, and a faint smell of dry erase markers. At the front of the room, the agenda was already on the screen. Security Infrastructure Review. Gannon Rusk, Lead Systems Architect. I stopped just inside the door. Not because I was surprised, I knew why I was there. Joran's business card had turned into an introduction, then a planning call, then this review with a systems board tied to the hospital network. Still, I looked at my name longer than I needed to. Gannon Rusk. No nickname, No correction required. No mother standing nearby to soften me into a story that made her comfortable. At the wedding, a place card had called me Cal and pushed me near the kitchen doors. In this room, my name was on the agenda before I even sat down. No one had to ask Danilo if I belonged there. No one had to check with my mother to decide whether I had become something. Joran came in a minute later with a folder under one arm and a paper cup of coffee in the other. "Glad you could make it, Gannon," he said. Just like that. Ordinary, easy, the right name without effort. "Thanks for inviting me," I said. He set his folder down. "You earned the seat. We're going to talk through the migration lessons first, then the infrastructure review. I'll introduce you when everyone gets here." When the others arrived, he did exactly that. "This is Gannon Rusk from Northline." He led the architecture side of the migration we discussed. No applause, no dramatic praise, just accuracy. And after everything that had happened, accuracy felt like kindness. The aftermath of the wedding had been quieter than people might expect. My mother never apologized the way I once imagined she would. She sent a few messages. Some were soft, some were defensive. Most circled back to how uncomfortable the wedding had become for her. Danilo sent one text. "Strange time to make a point." I did not answer. Colby called once and said, "Your mother misses you." He did not say, "I should have spoken up." He did not say, "You should have been in that picture." That told me enough. Kresha later mentioned that Tylee had asked Danilo how his own family did not know I had graduated. I never heard his answer. I only knew the question had finally been asked in a house where nobody used to ask any. The meeting was about to begin when my phone lit up beside my laptop. "Mom, can we talk?" For a few seconds, I looked at the message. There was a time when that text would have tightened my whole body. I would have wondered what I had done wrong, how quickly I needed to respond, and whether waiting would make me ungrateful. Now I look from the phone to the agenda. My name was still there. I did not delete the message. I did not answer it. I did not perform forgiveness, and I did not perform anger. I turned the phone face down. Maybe one day my mother and I would talk. But if we did, it would not be because she threatened money, guilt, or family image. It would have to be because she was ready to meet the man I actually became. And if that day never came, my life would not pause at the door waiting for her. The memories still hurt. The $8,400 withdrawal. The garage light on Danilo's car. The group chat without my name. The place card. The family photo where I stood outside the frame. They still existed. They just stopped giving orders. I had not stopped believing in family. I had stopped believing family had to cost me my own name. Joran glanced toward me from the head of the table. "Ready?" I opened my laptop. "Yes," I said. "I'm ready." The agenda stayed on the screen. My phone stayed face down. Around the table, people looked at me because they expected me to speak, not because they needed someone else to explain why I was allowed to. At the wedding, my family had placed me at the wrong table with the wrong name. Here, I sat in the right room with the right name, and no one needed convincing. The wedding did not make me successful. It only made them the last people in the room to find out. If you have ever had to stop shrinking yourself for family, tell me your story. I read every one.